Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Dread Time Stories. I'm your host, Dr. Phobia. And tonight, dear patients, our story comes from the world of creepypastas. Now, this one is special because it was actually recommended to me by one of your fellow community members. I'd like to give a shout out to Zombie Wolf 96 for recommending tonight's tale, Why My Brother is Afraid of Water. When I was a kid, my parents had a creek behind our house. It was pretty close, so every day of summer vacation, my brother and I would walk to it. We'd skip rocks, or we'd make sandwiches and camp out until supper. Sometimes we'd bring our rods and go fishing, though we never caught anything. Just little skinny gray fish that really weren't worth keeping. However, we never went swimming there, except for one time. It was during the first week of summer. I had just finished middle school, and my brother had just gotten out of the 4th grade with all A's, and my parents were exceptionally happy with us. Saturday came around, and when the clock hit 8 a.m., I woke up my brother, we put on our swim trunks, and headed down to the creek. It was a beautiful spot. The creek's bottle green water danced and shone under the mid-morning sun, and we could feel the soft wind brushing past us. On either side of the banks were old willow trees with long, thin branches and flat green leaves that hung down like dog's ears. We peeled off our shirts and plastered on the sunscreen. Even at that early hour, it was already getting warm. My brother didn't bother to change into his swim trunks. He was so set on getting in the water first that he just tore out across our camp on the riverside and pitched himself into the water, completely bare-ass naked. I hobbled and staggered towards the water, trying to put my trunks on and pull them up, yelling at him, "Get back here and put on your trunks, Roger." "I don't need 'em," he yelled back as he floated on his back, just like an otter does. "What if something swims up your pee hole?" I managed to get my swim trunks on just in time to hit the water. It was quite a jarring feeling the coolness of it that engulfs you after the sun beats down on your back. I just bobbed up and down just as he spat a mouthful of water right into my eyes. My brother floated there and laughed as I splashed around blind for a second. And when my vision cleared, he was already out in a deeper part of the creek, diving down and coming back up again like a dabbling duck. "I bet I can touch the bottom. What about you?" "No, I'm fine," I said. "Come on. You scared? I can do it." "Fine." I drew in my breath and went under. Under the water, everything was murky, green and black, where the sunlight stalled at the surface like a frightened camper with a lamp. I swam down past the fallen branches and the freshwater weeds, and with a shaky hand, I touched the soft silt of the creek bottom. I pulled back, leaving a palm print in the worm-brown riverbed. As I prepared to swim back up, I saw the outline of a huge fish. It was at least 4 feet long, with a sloping head and wide fins. It drifted around me for a few moments before darting off. I came to the surface, gasping for air. My brother was grinning wide. "See? Isn't that fun? Now watch me." I told him to wait a minute as he cocked his head to the side like a confused dog. "What?" I told him about the fish. His expression didn't change. "So? It's a big fish. I bet I can catch it with my bare hands." Before I could say anything else, he was under the water. And a minute later, he didn't come back up. "Roger?" I called his name over and over again. I was screaming it loud when he finally shot back up with a clump of river moss on his head. I'll admit, I jumped a little. "I scared you," he laughed, taking the moss off and throwing it back into the water. "Don't do that again. You were really scared." "I thought you were in trouble, you idiot." I had to restrain myself from punching him at that moment. Well, geez, I was just joking. He looked sullen for a bit. Then he was right back to grinning like a clown. Hey, I'm going back down. I bet I can catch that big fish. Before I could say anything, down he went. And a few seconds later, he bobbed up and was screaming, "Something bit me!" Roger, that is not funny. Just as those words left my mouth, I noticed a cloud of red that was expanding in the water around him, and my heart stopped. I swam over to get him, but out of the corner of my eye, I saw a dark shape in the water, curving back toward him. I grabbed him in one arm and took off towards the shore, swimming harder and faster than I ever thought I could. Roger was thrashing about and shrieking like a dying bird, and my ears were ringing. Every so often, he would cry out even louder, and I would turn back to see that thing in the water right on our tail. I could see its face in the water. The edge of the creek seemed to move away from us. Finally, we reached land, and I threw him onto the grass and climbed out. My arms and legs were aching down to the bone, and my head was pounding. My brother was shaking and completely silent. I looked him over and saw a patchwork of shallow red wounds where he had been bitten. My eyes followed them down to his right calf, and I nearly threw up when I saw it. On his calf, a golf ball-sized chunk of flesh was bitten completely off, and the wound was deep red and oozing. I snatched my t-shirt and wrapped it around the wound. The rest was superficial compared to it. We threw on our clothes and staggered back to our house. When we got inside, I told my mother everything, and her face turned so pale. She didn't even yell at us. My father told us never, ever to go back down there again, but he didn't need to. My brother did not speak. Even when we were driving him in the car to the hospital, he was dead silent for the entire trip. When we got to the hospital lobby, everyone in there just stopped and stared at us. Or rather, the blood-soaked t-shirt wrapped around my brother's leg. A nurse ran up to us and told us that my brother needed to go to the ER. The words "emergency room" prompted an outburst of dry sobbing from my mother. My father was stone-faced, and my brother was still shaking and looking around like a caged rat. He got taken in for surgery. A bald-headed doctor came out and described the damage using words like skin graft and eviscerated tissue. I didn't know what those words meant at that time, but I had a pretty good idea. The doctor cleared his throat. Also, we need to know how he was injured this way. My mom looked at me. I told him about the fish and how it had chased us until we reached dry land. I could tell from his face that he really didn't buy it. Are you sure it wasn't some kind of other animal? There aren't any fish around here that can make that kind of wound. My father looked down at me. Was it really a fish? I knew what I saw, and I told him as such. The doctor said, "Well, we checked the wound, and there were indentations around the wound that looked like human teeth. Are you sure the boy's brother didn't bite him?" And my father's hand balled into a fist. The doctor saw the look in my dad's eyes and immediately backpedaled. "I'm just saying, because the bite marks were consistent with human teeth, and the boy's been saying Josh over and over again since we put him on anesthetic." My father's arm dropped. My son would never. The doctor apologized and said I would have to have a plaster mold of my teeth made and take a psychiatric evaluation. "Just in case," he said. I couldn't believe it. I looked at my father and he just sighed and consented to the evaluation. For 3 hours every weekday for the rest of the month, I sat in a bleached white room and answered questions given to me by an older woman in Coke bottle glasses and a calling, condescending voice. My answers felt completely irrelevant. "Did you ever have violent tendencies toward your brother or other people?" I said no, and she asked me to think harder, try to remember everything. She would second guess everything I said and the tone of voice you talk to a dog with. It was embarrassing. Being told to answer honestly and then being told that your honest answer wasn't consistent with your honest answer the day before, or that you should think more clearly about your honest answer. I was eventually cleared. Even with the plaster mold in my teeth, I still feel I probably wouldn't have been if my father hadn't walked in on us one day with a newspaper in his fist. He slapped it down on the psychiatrist's desk and opened it to a page that said, "Local fisherman catches river monster." The lady looked at my father. My father looked at me. They knew I was right all along. And oh, how I wish I wasn't. The fish was laid out in the pictures. It had the same sloping head and broad fins. And at the bottom of the picture was its open mouth. It had a row of square, flat, human-looking teeth that were stained pink with blood. My brother recovered well. He still has a scar on his calf and walks with a slight limp, but the real damage isn't what you can see, like the nightmares. He would turn and writhe in his bed like a snake on fire, and his sheets would be damp with sweat. They were always silent nightmares, except for this one time he woke up Mom and Dad. He didn't even know he was screaming. He told them that the fish had come and dragged him down the bathroom drain to the deepest, darkest water. Then the fish would eat him alive, tearing him open like paper and eating his insides as they slid out of him into the icy blackness. Mom put him on some sleeping meds for a while, but that didn't help much at all. In my second year of high school, we moved away, and that seemed to help more than anything. The nightmares stopped, and he settled back to his old self. He still would not get in any water, not even swimming pools. Once we were at the zoo and the aquarium, and the sight of an alligator enclosure made him run back towards the bird exhibit. I don't remember where that creek was exactly, but I'm fine with that. Well, dear patients, that was Why My Brother is Afraid of the Water. I hope you enjoyed it, and thank you for listening. Like I always say in closing, check under your bed, look in your closet, and sleep with the light on. The life you save may very well be your own. Good night, everyone.